Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive.
Always exciting to dive in.
Yeah, and today we're looking at this really interesting concept
Right.
of inchoate. And for anyone who's not familiar with the word,
Right.
basically it's referring to those things in life that are still kind of in the process
Yeah.
of becoming,
Absolutely.
like those things that haven't quite reached their final form yet.
Yeah, I love that.
And we're going to be looking at some really cool reflections on personal growth and,
Right.
creativity and goals
hmm
um, from a source that we found that's really kind of thought-provoking.
Yeah, I was really struck by how this source seemed so comfortable with this idea of like
Yeah,
incompleteness.
right.
Like they're almost challenging this belief we all have that everything needs to have like a destination, a final end goal.
Well, it's like they're saying,
Yeah.
it's okay to be a work in progress,
Yeah.
you know?
Embrace the journey.
Yeah, embrace the journey and not be so obsessed
Totally.
with the destination.
Yeah.
And they talk about these different discovery phases they've gone through where they're constantly like exploring and reconfiguring their interests.
Yeah.
And that really resonated with me
Right.
because, there's so many times in my own life where I felt
Yeah.
pulled in different directions. Like I haven't quite,
Yeah.
figured it all out yet.
And I think that's where like the real beauty lies. You know,
Yeah.
this source seems to find this sense of peace and that constant exploration,
Right.
that willingness to embrace the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
And they acknowledge that they haven't necessarily found that final destination,
Yeah.
but it doesn't seem to bother them at all.
Right.
And I think that's such a powerful reminder that we don't need to have everything figured out
Exactly.
to move forward.
I love that. It's
Mhm.
like giving yourself permission to evolve, to change your mind,
Yeah.
to explore different paths without needing that perfect roadmap.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of paths,
Yeah.
this source has a really unique approach to goals,
Absolutely.
especially the ones that feel a bit daunting or unfinished.
Yeah, their perspective is so different from that typical, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
push relentlessly towards the finish line.
Right.
They talk about reaching a peak and then taking time to, like, record and let go for a while.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's like they're encouraging us to savor the process,
Yeah.
to celebrate those milestones we achieve,
Right.
and then step back to gain perspective before we keep moving forward.
That's so insightful. It's like when you're trying to learn a new language,
Mhm.
you spend weeks cramming vocabulary and grammar rules.
Right.
And then you hit a point where it's all just jumbled in your head.
Totally.
And so you step back, maybe watch a movie in that language or listen to some music,
Yeah.
and suddenly things start clicking into place.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that sometimes stepping away can be just as valuable as pushing forward.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminds me of that concept that the source mentions about letting your thoughts marinate,
Oh, yeah.
like a good sauce,
I like that.
Give your subconscious mind time to process and make new connections.
Right.
And then when you revisit that goal,
Yeah.
you're coming at it with fresh eyes
Yeah.
and a renewed sense of purpose.
That's such a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So we've talked about embracing this incompleteness of life
Mm,
and finding value in the journey.
right.
But what about those goals that feel like they might never be finished?
Right.
The ones that seem so big and overwhelming that you can't even see the finish line.
Yeah.
How do we even begin to approach those?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that feeling of being overwhelmed by a goal is something we all experience.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting because the source actually talks about how, in the grand scheme of things, most finish lines are invisible anyway.
Yeah.
It's not always about reaching a specific destination, but rather about continuous growth and evolution. Yeah. So instead of getting hung up on that elusive endpoint,
Right.
they suggest focusing on the baby steps.
Oh, okay.
Those small wins that keep you moving forward.
I can definitely see how that shift in perspective could be really helpful.
Yeah.
Like instead of feeling defeated by this enormity of a goal,
Right. Yep.
you're breaking it down into manageable chunks.
Exactly.
And, celebrating each step along the way.
It's like training for a marathon.
Mm-hmm.
If you're fixated on those 26.2 miles right from day one,
Yeah.
it could be totally paralyzing.
Oh, absolutely.
But if you focus on like running a little further each day,
Right.
celebrating each mile marker that you hit,
Yeah.
you build that momentum
Mm-hmm.
and that confidence.
Yeah.
And eventually that seemingly impossible distance starts to feel within reach.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks.
And it ties into something else that the source said that really resonated with me.
Yeah.
That comparison of personal growth to physical strength.
Right.
Like you don't have to be the strongest person in the world to feel stronger than you were yesterday.
Exactly. It's
Right.
about exceeding your own personal best,
Yes.
not comparing yourself to some external standard.
And that's such a crucial point.
Yeah.
Especially, in today's world
Oh, totally.
where it's so easy to get caught up in comparing ourselves to others.
Constantly.
Yeah.
Like we see these curated highlight reels on social media,
Right.
and we think, oh, I'll never be that successful.
Yeah.
I'll never be that talented.
But fulfilled.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the real measure of progress is how far we've come,
Mhm.
not how we stack up against someone else's carefully constructed image.
It's like that quote, comparison is the thief of joy.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah, and the source seems to be encouraging us to define our own finish lines, celebrate our own victories,
Yeah.
and just find satisfaction in that unique journey that unfolds for each of us.
Absolutely. And, that idea of celebrating our own victories
Yeah.
leads to another interesting concept from the source,
Okay.
creating from nothing.
Hmm.
They talk about how the value of creation isn't solely determined by external recognition.
Yeah.
Even if something doesn't receive widespread acclaim,
Yeah.
it can hold immense internal value for the creator.
Right.
It made me think of those artists who create just for the pure joy of it.
Yeah.
Never intending to sell their work or seek fame.
Like the source says, one man's trash is another man's treasure.
Exactly.
Value is so subjective. And sometimes the most meaningful creations are those that are never even shared with the world.
Right.
It's a good reminder to check in with ourselves, what truly motivates us to create.
Yeah.
Are we driven by that potential for external validation or by a deeper, more intrinsic desire to express ourselves?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, it's a bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
We all crave some level of recognition,
Right.
but it's important to remember that the act of creating itself holds inherent worth,
Yeah.
regardless of the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading an interview with this famous musician.
Oh, yeah.
And he was saying that some of his favorite songs were ones that never even made it onto an album.
Wow.
But he still cherished them.
Yeah.
Because they represented this period of growth and experimentation in his musical journey.
That's such a great point.
Yeah.
It reminds us that the journey itself is valuable, even if it doesn't lead to some grand public display of success.
Right.
But of course, we do live in a world where sharing our creations is often part of the process.
Absolutely.
And that brings us to a really practical question.
Okay.
How do we know when something is good enough
Right.
to share with others?
That's the question.
Especially for those of us who tend to be perfectionists.
Yeah.
That can be a real struggle.
Oh, totally. And the source offers some advice that might make those perfectionists out there a little uncomfortable.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
They suggest that if it's a personal project
Yeah.
and you're debating between sharing an unfinished work
Mm-hmm.
and potentially never finishing it at all,
Okay.
just share it.
Wow, that's a bold statement.
It is.
But I can see the wisdom in it.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught in the trap of perfectionism,
Right.
constantly tweaking and refining, always striving for some unattainable ideal.
Mhm.
And in the process, we often end up holding ourselves back from putting our work out there.
Totally.
And
It's
for
like
me-
we're waiting for this mythical moment of perfection
Yeah.
before we're willing to share our creations with the world.
Right.
But the reality is perfection is a moving target. There's always going to be something we could tweak,
Yeah.
something we could improve.
Right.
And sometimes that fear of imperfection becomes a form of procrastination
Oh, absolutely.
that keeps us from ever truly sharing our gifts.
No, it's like we build these walls around ourselves,
yeah.
convinced that our work isn't worthy of being seen
Yeah.
until it reaches some, arbitrary standard of perfection. But what if we challenge that assumption?
Yeah.
What if we embrace the vulnerability of sharing our work in its inchoate form?
Yeah.
Imperfections and all.
I think the source is suggesting that by letting go of that need for perfection, we open ourselves up to a whole new level of growth and connection.
Yeah.
Sharing our work, even in its unfinished state, can lead to valuable feedback,
Right.
unexpected collaborations,
Yeah.
and just a deeper understanding of our own creative process.
It's like taking a leap of faith
Totally.
and trusting that the world is ready to embrace our authentic selves,
Yeah.
messy edges and all.
And who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe by putting our work out there, we'll inspire others to do the same.
Right.
It's like creating a ripple effect of creativity and vulnerability that
Yeah.
spreads outwards.
breaking down those walls of perfectionism and fear
Hmm.
that so often hold us back.
Exactly.
It makes me think of all the incredible works of art, literature, music, innovation
Yeah.
that we wouldn't have if creators had been too afraid to share their ideas
Oh,
in their raw, unpolished form.
I know
Like,
it.
imagine if Van Gogh had kept all those canvases hidden away, convinced that they weren't good enough to be seen.
Right.
Or if Jane Austen had never let anyone read her early drafts,
Yeah.
paralyzed by the fear of criticism.
We'd be missing out on so much
Absolutely.
beauty, insight, inspiration.
It's a reminder that the journey of creation is often messy, unpredictable,
Totally.
full of twists and turns,
Hmm.
but it's in that messiness that the magic happens.
It really is.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of the inchoate,
Okay.
I want to leave you with this thought.
Yeah.
We've explored the idea of embracing the unfinished, the developing the yet to be realized.
Right.
And what we've discovered is that there's a profound beauty and freedom
Mm-hmm.
in letting go of that need for perfection
Yeah.
and allowing ourselves to be works in progress.
It's about finding comfort and motivation in the journey itself,
Yes.
not just in the destination.
Right.
It's about celebrating our small victories, embracing our imperfections, and trusting that the world is ready to receive our authentic selves, even in our inchoate form.
So we challenge you to consider,
Okay.
what inchoate aspect of your life are you most excited to nurture and see evolve?
Mm.
What project, what dream, what part of yourself
Yeah,
is waiting to be brought into fuller being?
good question.
How can you find joy in the process of becoming,
Right.
even without a clear finish line in sight?
Remember, the beauty lies in that continual unfolding of potential. The inchoate is not something to be feared or avoided,
Right.
but rather something to be embraced and celebrated.
Yes.
It's where our greatest growth and most meaningful creations often begin.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the inchoate.
Always a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep creating, and keep embracing the beautiful messiness of it all.